You want to know what a $180 million defense system sounds like when it dies? It doesn't scream, it just goes quiet. Complete digital silence. I was sitting in my Ford F-150 outside Alpine Corporation at 11:45 a.m. on a Tuesday in March, watching my laptop screen go dark as CyberGuard, 7 years of my life, locked itself down in front of a room full of Pentagon generals. The countdown had hit 0:45 minutes earlier. The screens went black and Charles Morrison's career imploded in real time. The best part? He had no idea I was watching from the Whole Foods parking lot 6 blocks away on South Federal, or that I'd triggered the whole meltdown from my truck. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up to 8:15 a.m. when Charles fired me for refusing to train his TikTok influencer Nephew how to handle national security. That's when this whole thing started. My name's Thomas Fitzgerald, but everyone calls me Tom. 46 years old, divorced dad, 16 years as a Navy SEAL, before I got into cybersecurity here in Denver. I'd been senior systems architect at Alpine Corporation for 7 years. And CyberGuard wasn't just my job, it was my life's work. The most advanced cybersecurity platform the Department of Defense had ever seen, protecting everything from power grids to hospital networks to military bases, from every hacker from Beijing to Moscow. That Tuesday morning started like any other. I grabbed my usual coffee from the shop on Colfax, sat through the typical Colorado traffic on I-25, and walked into Charles's corner office thinking we were going to discuss the Pentagon contract renewal. The meeting was supposed to be about expanding CyberGuard's capabilities, maybe adding new threat detection algorithms for the next phase rollout. Instead, I found Charles pacing behind his glass desk like a caged animal, sweating through his $3,000 suit, despite the building's air conditioning running full blast. You could practically smell the desperation coming off him. "Tom, sit down. No coffee offer this time. No small talk about the Broncos or the weather. That should have been my first warning. Something was seriously wrong. We need to discuss operational efficiency," he said, using that corporate speak that always meant someone was about to get screwed over. I'd heard variations of that phrase before during my Navy days when some Pentagon desk jockey wanted to replace experienced sailors with cheaper contractors who didn't know the difference between a submarine and a surfboard. "I've brought in a consultant," Charles continued, his voice carrying that fake enthusiasm that executives use when they're about to announce something completely idiotic. "Someone who understands the global marketplace, the new economy, the digital native generation." That's when he walked in, Austin Morrison, Charles's 25-year-old nephew, dressed like he was heading to a music festival instead of a defense contractor's office. I knew him from TikTok. My son Lucas had shown me his videos during one of our Sunday dinners. 180,000 followers watching him review energy drinks and crypto investments while standing in front of his uncle's Tesla Model S in the company parking garage. "Uncle Chuck says you're going to show me the ropes," Austin chirped, already pulling out his iPhone to record. "This is so sick. I'm thinking we could do a whole series behind the scenes at a defense company. My followers would totally eat up authentic content like this. Maybe we could even do some AR filters with the security screens." I looked at Charles, hoping this was some kind of elaborate joke. "You want me to train him on CyberGuard?" "Austin has fresh perspectives, Tom. He graduated magna cum laude in business communications from CU. The board thinks new blood is exactly what we need to modernize our approach and connect with younger demographics. New blood, right? What they needed was someone who understood that CyberGuard wasn't some social media app you could figure out over a weekend of Red Bull and YouTube tutorials. This was 12 layers of military-grade encryption, protecting the backbone of American infrastructure. The system that kept the lights on in hospitals, that protected water treatment plants from cyber terrorists. That made sure Russian hackers couldn't shut down the power grid during a Colorado blizzard. But Charles had dollar signs dancing in his eyes and a board of directors breathing down his neck about cost reduction and market expansion. Alpine stock had been flat for 18 months, and the shareholders were getting restless. They wanted results, and they wanted them now, regardless of what it might cost in terms of actual security. "I'm completely swamped with the Pentagon security review," I said, keeping my voice level and professional. Maybe someone from the training department could help him get oriented with basic protocols first. Charles's face went hard, that executive mask slipping to reveal the desperate man underneath. "This isn't a request, Tom. It's a direct order from the board. I'd been in the Navy long enough to recognize when someone was giving you an order they knew was wrong. The kind of order that gets good sailors killed because some officer cared more about politics and career advancement than protecting the people under his command. "I can't do that, Charles." The words hung in the air like smoke from a misfired round. 16 years of military service had taught me when to follow orders and when to stand your ground. This was definitely a stand your ground moment. Can't or won't. His voice dropped to that dangerous quiet that officers use right before they destroy your career and everything you've worked for. "Won't," I said without hesitation. CyberGuard protects critical infrastructure, power plants, hospitals, military communications networks. It's not a training exercise for social media consultants who think cybersecurity is just another content opportunity. Charles's hand moved toward his desk phone, like he was drawing a weapon. "Send security up here now." Austin was still recording, completely oblivious to the fact that he was documenting the end of my career at Alpine Corporation. "Thomas Fitzgerald," Charles said, his voice cold as a January morning in the Rockies. "Your refusal to follow direct orders and adapt to our evolving business model shows you're no longer aligned with company objectives. You're terminated, effective immediately. Security escort. 15 minutes to pack my personal belongings." The whole corporate termination routine that I'd seen happened to other people, but never thought would happen to me. But here's what Charles didn't know, what none of them knew. I'd been planning for this exact scenario since the day I started building CyberGuard. See, when my ex-wife Sarah got cancer 6 years back, the medical bills nearly wiped us out. Even with insurance, the treatments, the specialists, the experimental drugs that weren't covered. It was a financial disaster that taught me never to put all my eggs in one corporate basket again. That's when I set up Fitzgerald Tech Holdings, LLC, with my mom, Margaret, as the primary stakeholder. Every patent, every piece of core architecture, every critical component that made CyberGuard actually work was filed under that LLC, not Alpine. Perfectly legal, perfectly planned, and about to become Charles Morrison's worst nightmare. 2 security guards walked me down to my office. Professional guys, both veterans who'd served overseas and knew this whole situation, stunk worse than a porta potty at a music festival after 3 days of heat and beer. In the elevator down to the 15th floor, I filled them in on what was really happening. "They're selling us out, boys," I said quietly, making sure the elevator cameras couldn't pick up my words. "Charles has meetings scheduled with foreign investors next week. Wants to license CyberGuard technology to whoever writes the biggest check." One of the guards, a former Marine who'd done 2 tours in Iraq, just shook his head and muttered something under his breath about corporate traitors. The other guy, Navy like me, asked if there was anything they could do to help. "Just give me my full 15 minutes in the office," I said, "and maybe take your time walking me to the parking garage." My office looked exactly the same as it had 3 hours earlier when I'd been a respected senior architect, instead of an escorted security risk. Pictures of Lucas at his football games lined my desk. Him scoring the winning touchdown at the regional championship last month, getting his academic achievement award. Both of us at Red Rocks last summer, grinning like idiots after seeing some classic rock band. There was my old unit photo from Afghanistan, the original CyberGuard development team, working 20-hour days in that converted warehouse we'd rented off Federal Boulevard, and my coffee mug that Lucas had given me for Father's Day. World's okayest dad. 15 minutes to pack up 7 years of my professional life. I grabbed the personal stuff first. Photos, the mug, that small American flag Lucas had made me in middle school art class. But what I really needed was already in my jacket pocket. A USB drive that looked like any other storage device, but contained something Charles had never bothered to investigate. That drive held the original patent filings, the licensing agreements, and most importantly, the administrative keys to CyberGuard's deepest security protocols. Protocol Alpha, I called it. My insurance policy that I'd hoped I'd never have to use. "Don't take any company property," Austin announced from my doorway, still recording with his phone like this was all some reality show episode. "Uncle Chuck said you people always try to steal stuff when you get fired." You people? Like I was some kind of criminal instead of the guy who'd spent 7 years keeping his comfortable lifestyle safe from the people who wanted to destroy everything he took for granted. "Everything I need is right here," I said, patting my jacket pocket where the USB drive sat next to my truck keys. The walk to the elevator felt like a funeral march. Other engineers and support staff watched from their cubicles, some giving me sympathetic looks, others just keeping their heads down to avoid getting caught up in whatever corporate drama was playing out. As the elevator doors closed, I pulled out my phone and sent a quick text to my core team. Storm incoming. Watch the 11:00 a.m. demo real careful. Kelly Rodriguez, my lead developer, and probably the smartest programmer I'd ever worked with, texted back immediately. What did you do, Tom? Nothing yet, but they're about to find out what happens when you mess with American defense infrastructure. My F-150 had never felt more like a mobile command center. I fired up my laptop right there in the Alpine parking garage, connecting through my phone's hotspot instead of the company network. Within minutes, I was logged into CyberGuard's administrative interface through the back channels I'd built into the system from day one. The screen came to life with a simple message. Welcome, System Architect. All systems operational. Protocol Alpha, armed and ready. Protocol Alpha. While Charles and his board had been celebrating each new government contract I delivered, I'd been quietly building something they didn't even know existed. A dead man's switch wired directly into CyberGuard's heart, designed to protect the system from exactly this kind of corporate incompetence. The logic was elegant in its simplicity. If the primary system architect's employment status changed to terminated without proper security clearance transfer protocols, CyberGuard would automatically lock down everything. No access, no demonstrations, no $180 million contracts until the ownership dispute got resolved through proper legal channels. I checked my watch. 8:47 a.m. Charles's big Pentagon demonstration was scheduled for 11 a.m. sharp. He'd have a conference room full of generals and defense, contractors watching him show off technology he thought belonged to him. Time to teach him the difference between licensing something and owning it. I activated the protocol with a single keystroke. CyberGuard began its countdown. 2 hours, 13 minutes, 0 seconds, and ticking down steadily toward Charles's destruction. 133 minutes until Charles's world came apart at the seams. I sat in my truck, watching the countdown tick down on my laptop screen, while Denver traffic crawled by on Federal Boulevard. My phone buzzed with a text from Lucas between his classes at Cherry Creek High. Dad, saw some weird stuff trending on Twitter about your company. Everything cool? I smiled as I typed back. Everything's better than cool, son. Your old man just reminded some people why they shouldn't mess with guys who actually know how to build things. Awesome. Can't wait to hear the story. Gotta get to AP Chemistry. Love you. Love you too, kiddo. That kid, 17 years old, straight A student, varsity quarterback, and smart enough to probably run circles around half the executives at Alpine. I was doing this as much for his future as anything else. Lucas deserved to grow up in a country where critical infrastructure was protected by competent professionals, not handed over to social media influencers for content creation. I drove downtown to Stephen Walsh's law office on 17th Street, past the food trucks and the mile-high city murals that made Denver what it was. Stephen had handled the Fitzgerald Tech Holdings LLC paperwork years ago, and he'd been waiting for this phone call ever since. Tom, he said, as his secretary showed me into his corner office overlooking the mountains. I heard about your employment status change. Ready to discuss your options? Through his floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the Alpine building 12 blocks away. Up on the 22nd floor, Charles was probably making final preparations for his demo, completely unaware that in exactly 1 hour and 54 minutes, his $180 million defense contract was going to explode like an IED in downtown Baghdad. Let's talk about what happens when that countdown hits 0, I said. Stephen pulled out a thick folder labeled Fitzgerald Technologies Contingency Plans. We'd been preparing for this day for years, running through different scenarios, making sure every legal angle was covered. The man was thorough, which is why I'd hired him in the first place. CyberGuard patent filings are rock solid, Stephen said, spreading documents across his conference table. Every core innovation traces back to your LLC. Alpine has been licensing technology they never actually owned. They had full usage rights as long as certain employment conditions were maintained. Conditions that were violated at 8:15 this morning. Exactly. And Tom, I've got some interesting news. I've been in contact with Patricia Brooks at Alpine Defense Partners. They've been watching Alpine for months, specifically interested in CyberGuard technology. When news of today's events gets out, they're going to want to talk. At exactly 11 a.m., the Alpine conference room had been transformed into what looked like a military command center. I knew this because Kelly Rodriguez was texting me real-time updates from inside the building. 3 massive screens displayed CyberGuard's interface in high-definition glory, while the company's remaining engineers stood ready at support stations like they were launching a space shuttle instead of demonstrating cybersecurity software. The Pentagon evaluation team sat around the polished conference table, 4 generals, 6 defense contractors, and enough combined authority to control more firepower than most small countries. Charles stood at the head of the table, confident as a poker player holding what he thought were 4 aces. Austin sat beside him with his iPhone, live streaming the whole thing to his TikTok followers with captions like, "Taking Uncle's company to the next level, Walsh's defense, tech entrepreneur, or disruptor." "Ladies and gentlemen," Charles began, his practice presentation voice echoing off the conference room walls. "What you're about to see isn't just cybersecurity software. It's the future of American defense infrastructure, streamlined for the global marketplace and ready for the digital native generation." He nodded to the demonstration engineer, some kid fresh out of Colorado State, who'd been hired to replace Brad Thompson after I'd recommended Brad for a raise 8 months ago. The kid had talent, but nowhere near the experience needed to handle a system this complex. The engineer started typing commands, and the screens flickered to life with CyberGuard's initialization sequence. Everything looked perfect for exactly 17 seconds. The graphics were sharp. The response time was instant. The interface was clean and professional. Then the first error message appeared. "System architect authentication required." The kid frowned, typing faster. "Just a minor authentication glitch, sir. Let me reset the connection. Access denied. Employment verification failed." "What's the problem?" Charles's voice carried that edge that officers get when their carefully planned battle strategy starts falling apart in real time. "I'm not sure, sir. The system is requesting architect-level credentials that don't seem to exist in our current database." That's when my countdown hit 0. The screens flashed red 3 times, then displayed a message that made Charles's face go white as a Colorado snowstorm. "Security lockdown initiated. CyberGuard system in protective mode. All access revoked. Time remaining, 0 hours, 0 minutes, 0 seconds. Contact system administrator for resolution." The Pentagon team exchanged those looks that senior military officers perfect over decades of dealing with contractors who overpromise and underdeliver. General Patricia Hayes, who'd been evaluating defense systems since before Charles got out of business school, leaned forward with the expression of someone who just watched a $1 billion missile miss its target by 3 time zones. "Mr. Morrison," she said, in that steel-trap voice that had probably terrified junior officers for the past 25 years. "Is there a problem with your system?" The room fell silent, except for the humming of the air conditioning and Austin's whispered commentary to his TikTok audience about technical difficulties and digital disruption in action. Charles was about to learn what real disruption looked like. "No problem at all, General Hayes," Charles said, his voice cracking like a teenager's. "Just a routine security protocol that'll be resolved momentarily." He turned to Brad Thompson, the guy they'd promoted to CTO about 30 seconds after my security escort ended. "Fix this now." Brad's fingers flew across his keyboard, sweat beading on his forehead like he was trying to defuse an actual bomb. "Sir, I can't access the core systems. There's something here about Protocol Alpha, but I've never seen that protocol before." "Protocol Alpha? What the hell is Protocol Alpha?" Nobody in that room knew the answer, which was exactly the point. I'd built Protocol Alpha so deep into CyberGuard's architecture that finding it would be like looking for a specific grain of sand on Myrtle Beach. "Get Thomas Fitzgerald on the phone," Charles barked at his assistant, desperation starting to show through his corporate facade. "Sir, he was terminated this morning per your direct orders." "I don't care if he was terminated. Get him on the line now." The call went straight to my voicemail, the professional recording I'd set up specifically for this moment. "You've reached Thomas Fitzgerald. I'm currently unavailable. But if this is regarding CyberGuard system architecture, please consult your existing licensing agreements and employment contracts. Thanks for calling, and have a great day." General Hayes stood up slowly, gathering her materials with the deliberate movements of someone who just wasted 4 hours of their valuable time. The other Pentagon officials followed her lead, their faces showing the kind of disappointment usually reserved for contractors who promised stealth technology and delivered paper airplanes. "Mr. Morrison, it appears you have significant internal issues that need resolution. We'll need to postpone this demonstration indefinitely." "Wait, please, General. This is just a minor technical issue we can resolve in minutes." "Minor?" The general's voice could have frozen the South Platte River in July. "Your core defense system is completely inaccessible during a $180 million contract evaluation. Your marketing representative is live streaming our classified discussion to social media, and apparently the only person who can fix this crisis is someone you fired 3 hours ago." She headed for the door, her team following like a well-disciplined unit retreating from a compromised position. "We'll be in touch. Maybe." The Pentagon team filed out in crisp formation, leaving behind a conference room that felt like a tomb. Austin was still, recording, finally starting to understand that his uncle's company was imploding in real time, and his TikTok followers were witnessing the greatest corporate failure in defense industry history. "Uncle Chuck," he whispered, finally lowering his phone as the magnitude of the situation started penetrating his social media bubble. "Like, can't we just hire him back or something?" Charles turned on him with the kind of fury that would have made a drill sergeant proud. "Get out, now, and turn that phone off." Austin fled the room, his designer sneakers squeaking rapidly down the hallway, but the damage was already done. His live stream had broadcast Alpine's complete humiliation to the world. Alpine fail was trending within minutes, complete with memes of Charles's sweating face and commentary about nepotism in defense contracting. When the screens finally went completely dark, a single message appeared in bold white letters. "CyberGuard system in protective mode. All access revoked. For licensing inquiries, please contact Fitzgerald Tech Holdings, LLC. Authorized representative, Margaret Fitzgerald." In the span of 3 hours, Charles Morrison had lost everything. The Pentagon contract was dead. Alpine's stock price was in free fall, as news of the failed demonstration spread through defense industry circles faster than gossip at a church potluck. And CyberGuard, the crown jewel technology that justified the company's entire valuation, was locked behind digital walls that only I controlled. My phone lit up like the 4th of July fireworks over the Capitol, with missed calls from Alpine's legal team. Stephen Walsh texted me from his office. 27 attempts to reach you in the past hour. Should I return their calls? Let them sweat until tomorrow, I texted back. I'm busy building the future. Around 1:00 p.m., my phone rang. Brad Thompson sounding like a man who just watched his career go up in flames like the old Denver Coliseum. "Tom, this is Brad. Look, I know what happened this morning was unfortunate, but we need your help here. The entire system is down, and frankly, none of us understand the architecture well enough to troubleshoot it. System's working fine, Brad. It's just not working for you. Come on, Tom. We both know this is about more than just your termination." "You're absolutely right. It's about Charles trying to sell American defense technology to foreign investors. It's about replacing experienced engineers with social media consultants. It's about putting quarterly profits ahead of protecting the infrastructure that keeps American families safe." There was a long silence on the line. When Brad spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "The board is willing to negotiate. Full reinstatement, back pay, promotion to VP of Engineering. We can even discuss equity options. Too late for negotiations, Brad. I've already got a better offer." That afternoon, I found myself in the executive offices of Alpine Defense Partners downtown, sitting across from Patricia Brooks in a conference room that overlooked the South Platte River. Patricia was the kind of woman who'd been making $300 million deals since before the internet existed, and she had the reputation to prove it. "Fitzgerald," she said, studying me over her coffee cup. "I've had a very interesting day. General Hayes called me personally after the Alpine demonstration. In 25 years of defense contracting, she said she's never witnessed such a spectacular system failure. Alpine disappointed her. No. She smiled with the sharpness of a combat knife. Charles Morrison disappointed her. Alpine is just office space and furniture. What we're interested in is CyberGuard technology. And CyberGuard, our legal team discovered this morning, was never really Alpine's to sell in the first place. We spent the next 3 hours working through details. Patricia's team was thorough, asking technical questions that showed they understood exactly what they were acquiring. This wasn't some quick cash grab. These people respected the technology and what it meant for national security. By 6 p.m., the framework was taking shape. Fitzgerald Defense Systems would be incorporated within the week with $300 million in backing. The patents would transfer smoothly from my mother's LLC, giving us complete control of CyberGuard technology. More importantly, we'd have the resources to properly develop and protect American infrastructure without corporate interference. There's one more thing, Patricia said as we wrapped up the preliminary agreements. General Hayes specifically requested that you personally oversee all future Pentagon implementations. She was quite impressed with your security protocols. I drove home that evening, thinking about Lucas and his dreams of West Point. Tonight, I'd tell him about integrity, about standing up for what's right even when it costs you everything. But I'd also tell him about preparation, about building something that can't be taken away from you by people who don't understand its value. They fired me at 8:15 a.m. for refusing to compromise American security. By 6 p.m. the same day, I owned the very technology their entire company was built on, had $300 million to develop it properly, and the respect of the Pentagon officials who mattered. When I got home, Lucas was in the driveway shooting baskets, preparing for another season as Cherry Creek's starting quarterback. He looked up as I pulled in, that same determined expression I saw in the mirror every morning. "Dad, how was your day?" "Well, son, it started pretty rough, but it ended up being one of the best days of my career. Want to hear about it?" As we sat on the porch with a couple of Cokes, watching the Colorado sunset paint the Rockies purple and gold, I told him the whole story. About standing up for principles, about being prepared for the worst, and about how sometimes doing the right thing leads to something better than you ever imagined. "That's pretty awesome, Dad," Lucas said when I finished. "So, what happens next? Next, we build something that'll keep this country safe for your generation. And maybe, when you're ready, you can help me run it." And that, as Lucas would say, was pretty awesome indeed.